Please be advised the following material is intended for informational and entertainment purposes only. This report contains the exact federal courtroom testimony from the Sean Diddy trial, as documented by Inner City Press. Before the courtroom even came to order, whispers had already begun circulating among journalists, legal analysts, and cybercrime specialists waiting in line. Word had leaked that today's hearing would include the most damning digital evidence yet in the ongoing federal case against Sean Diddy Combs. But no one could have predicted the impact that FBI Special Agent Marcus Chen's testimony would have, not just on the court, but on Diddy himself. Within moments of the presentation beginning, it became clear something far more disturbing than anyone anticipated was about to unfold. Marcus Chen took the stand with the composed demeanor of a man who had seen behind too many digital curtains. A former cybersecurity architect turned federal cyber division expert, Chen wasn't there to speculate or suggest. He was there to present what he called definitive proof, technical evidence, forensic data, and an alarming glimpse into a hidden world of surveillance so advanced it rivaled anything seen in corporate espionage or state intelligence operations. His testimony began with what seemed like standard procedure, a breakdown of the raid that occurred at Diddy's Miami property. But as Chen walked the court through the floor plans, thermal scans, and metadata extraction from devices seized during the operation, a very different picture began to take shape. Buried behind false walls and accessible only through concealed entry points was what the FBI called a climate-controlled data fortress. This wasn't just a panic room. It was an underground surveillance command center. Constructed with noise-dampening insulation, redundancy power systems, and environmental stabilization technology, the room was designed not for safety but for secrecy. Chen explained how they initially assumed it was a luxury server room for high-end entertainment systems or perhaps crypto mining equipment. But the moment they discovered specialized indexing databases, directional microphones, covert high-resolution cameras, and biometric triggers, all feeding into a central storage system, they knew they had found something far more sinister. Diddy sat motionless as Chen described what was stored inside the servers. Over 8.4 petabytes of data spanning more than 2 decades, with file structures labeled by individual names, potential leverage scores, vulnerability indexes, and metadata documenting context and timestamps. This wasn't raw surveillance footage randomly collected. This was methodically categorized intelligence on celebrities, executives, politicians, and artists, each entry sorted by how it might be used. As Chen spoke, a series of visuals was displayed on the courtroom monitors. Each slide contained redacted names but detailed the system's interface, including a dashboard labeled Influence Management System. It tracked compliance scores, escalation protocols, and the effectiveness of what the software internally referred to as exposure events. When specific individuals were captured in compromising scenarios, many of them unaware, they were then indexed and tagged for potential deployment during negotiations, legal threats, or professional crossroads. What caught everyone's attention wasn't just the scale, it was the intentionality. Chen explained that the system wasn't built overnight. Based on timestamps and architecture evolution, it began in 2001, just as Diddy was expanding his business empire. Over time, the infrastructure had been systematically upgraded. Cameras were added in high-risk rooms like bedrooms and private lounges. Microphones were installed in custom lighting fixtures. Software was integrated that could trigger recordings based on specific voice prints or keywords. Nothing about the system was accidental. In one shocking moment, Chen revealed that forensic teams had discovered what appeared to be internal deployment logs, files that documented when surveillance content had been accessed and extracted for use. Each deployment log included delivery method, recipient initials, and outcome summaries. These weren't just stored for curiosity. They were used, according to the logs, during contract renewals, crisis negotiations, and, allegedly, to halt damaging allegations before they ever reached public attention. Diddy's legal team objected fiercely, claiming prejudicial effect and calling the evidence speculative, but the judge allowed Chen to continue. What he presented next silenced the room. The database contained emotion recognition software, used to catalog not just what was captured but how the subjects appeared to feel. Someone showing signs of distress or vulnerability was flagged as high value. Instances of intoxication, romantic entanglements, verbal arguments, or actions inconsistent with public persona were all sorted into specific categories like high-risk leverage or time-sensitive use. Chen's analysis didn't stop there. He walked the court through the security protocols surrounding the data. Military-grade encryption. Distributed backups in multiple jurisdictions. A proprietary mobile app capable of remote monitoring and even deployment, including push alerts when targeted individuals were recorded or arrived on monitored properties. He paused and looked directly at the judge when he said that this level of technical sophistication indicated collaboration with professionals far beyond any standard private security contractor. Elements of the system, including anti-forensic components and metadata obfuscation tools, bore hallmarks of intelligence community infrastructure. These weren't tools used to protect a home. They were tools designed to weaponize information. The courtroom was breathless. Diddy stared blankly ahead, his fingers twitching slightly. Chen continued. Forensic teams also found something called persuasion packets, bundled data compilations created by the system for high-leverage scenarios. Each packet included clips, transcriptions, predictive behavior analysis, and suggested scripts for negotiation. Essentially, the system had been programmed not just to observe and record, but to exploit. But the final detail was what seemed to push Diddy over the edge. Chen explained that embedded within the system was a performance dashboard, a live view interface showing which targets had recently been exposed to material and whether they had adjusted their behavior accordingly. The logs showed color-coded risk levels, effectiveness percentages, and even recommended escalation tactics for those not complying with the implicit pressure. As these technical details were shown on screen, Diddy's hands began to shake. His face turned pale, and he leaned forward, gripping the table with such force that his knuckles widened. One of his attorneys reached out, whispering something, but Diddy didn't respond. Chen was mid-sentence when the judge interrupted, alarmed by the sudden change in Diddy's condition. His breathing became shallow and rapid. He seemed unable to lift his head. Water spilled from his cup as he tried to reach it, his arm trembling uncontrollably. The judge called an immediate recess. Courtroom officers moved to assist as Diddy's legal team tried to shield him from view. A medical team was summoned. Oxygen was administered, and the courtroom was cleared within minutes. As the lights dimmed and the monitors flickered off, the only thing that remained was the stunned silence left behind. Even the reporters who had seen everything were speechless. This wasn't just a trial about a celebrity under fire. This was an exposé into a world of technological control, weaponized surveillance, and the lengths someone might go to maintain power. When the court reconvened later that afternoon, Diddy was gone, transported for medical evaluation. His team cited an acute anxiety episode, but no one in that courtroom doubted what had caused it. Agent Chen remained calm, his posture unchanged as he exited the stand. To him, this was just another presentation of evidence. But to everyone else, it was a glimpse into the kind of hidden system that could shape entire industries without anyone ever knowing. When court resumed the following day, the tension was even thicker than before. Everyone from seasoned legal correspondents to tech industry analysts filled the gallery, eager to see what revelations would follow Marcus Chen's bombshell testimony. The previous session had already left Diddy hospitalized for what his legal team called an acute anxiety attack. But behind closed doors, speculation was swirling that the panic wasn't just medical, it was fear. Fear of what might come next as the FBI continued to unveil details of the alleged blackmail operation. Prosecutors began by reviewing the core of Chen's testimony, ensuring the jury understood the weight of what they had heard. The evidence wasn't abstract, it was mapped, cataloged, and quantified. The server room at Diddy's Miami property wasn't a mere collection of cameras and hard drives. It was, according to Chen, a nerve center for a 2-decade-long surveillance and leverage campaign, meticulously maintained and upgraded. The day's session opened with new evidence. Federal digital forensics teams had uncovered a series of encrypted archives during their raid. These weren't random files but structured datasets with folder names like VIP High Risk, Industry Leverage, and Compliance Archives. Each folder contained dozens of subdirectories with unique identifiers. Prosecutors explained that they were still in the process of decrypting all the data, but what they had already accessed was enough to raise alarms across multiple industries. As the first visual of these directory structures appeared on the courtroom screen, the gallery leaned forward. Each folder name suggested a story, a hidden narrative that could upend reputations and careers. Redacted samples of the file names were displayed, initials, event codes, and time-stamped recordings spanning years. No names were revealed publicly, but everyone in the room knew that some of the biggest names in entertainment could be involved. Diddy's absence was noticeable. His defense attorneys sat stone-faced, occasionally whispering to each other, but their client's empty chair told its own story. Prosecutors reminded the jury that this case wasn't about speculation or rumor. It was about forensic evidence, digital architecture, and the deliberate design of a system meant to control narratives from behind the scenes. Marcus Chen returned to the stand for cross-examination. The defense attempted to discredit his analysis, arguing that the system could have been a high-end home security network. Chen, unflinching, countered every suggestion with technical specifics. He explained how legitimate security systems are designed: basic camera grids, motion sensors, limited retention storage. What they found at Diddy's property, however, was vastly different. It wasn't just surveillance, it was surveillance with intent. He described specialized software modules with features like facial recognition indexing, voice tone analysis, and automatic tagging of behavioral anomalies. These aren't features used to protect a property, they're used to profile people. Chen's tone remained steady, but the content of his testimony grew more chilling with each word. He outlined how certain areas of the properties had denser surveillance coverage than others: bedrooms, private lounges, studios. Places where guests assumed privacy but, according to the evidence, were recorded in high definition with both video and directional audio. Prosecutors then presented something that sent shockwaves through the courtroom: partial transcripts of recovered audio logs. These logs were generated by the system's voice-activated triggers. Though names were redacted, the content revealed personal conversations, private arguments, and intimate moments, none of which had any security relevance. The clear implication was that this material wasn't being collected for protection but for leverage. Chen explained the indexing system in more detail. Every captured file was automatically analyzed for keywords, emotional tone, and contextual risk factors. The system's artificial intelligence, as discovered by forensic teams, would assign a leverage score to each recording. A heated argument between two celebrities might score higher than casual small talk. A confidential business deal could be flagged as high-value content. And all of this was compiled into an internal database with search functionality that allowed quick retrieval of compromising moments. One moment during Chen's testimony drew audible gasps from the gallery. Forensic analysts had found a set of deployment instructions embedded in the system's code. These were essentially playbooks, step-by-step guidelines on how to prepare, package, and deliver compromising content for maximum impact while ensuring no traceable link to the source. This included methods for anonymized delivery, encrypted messaging, and even instructions for using third parties to relay information. Prosecutors pointed out that such detailed deployment protocols are unnecessary for any legitimate security purpose. Their existence strongly implied that the system wasn't just passively collecting data, it was actively weaponizing it. While Chen testified, media outlets across the country were already running headlines about the alleged Blackmail server. News anchors debated the broader implications, while cybersecurity experts described the system as one of the most advanced private surveillance networks ever documented. Social media exploded with speculation about which celebrities might be entangled in this digital web. Hashtags linked to the trial trended worldwide, with fans and insiders alike demanding answers. Inside the courtroom, the tension built as Chen described how the system appeared to evolve over time. Early versions were crude, focusing mainly on video. Later iterations added advanced features like emotional analytics, substance detection algorithms, and voice pattern analysis capable of identifying stress, deception, or intoxication. The level of precision suggested that whoever designed and maintained this infrastructure was not just wealthy but deeply strategic. Prosecutors highlighted that Chen's team had traced multiple instances where access logs spiked immediately before major entertainment industry events, award shows, contract negotiations, and high-profile scandals. While they stopped short of asserting direct causation, the pattern was undeniable. Content flagged in the database often coincided with sudden shifts in public narratives or surprising career decisions by those who had recently visited Diddy's properties. Then came the revelation of compliance metrics. This was the system's internal tool for tracking how effective a piece of leverage material had been. Did a certain celebrity suddenly cancel a lawsuit? Did an executive approve a contract on unusually favorable terms? If so, the system's metrics would mark that case as resolved and file it under completed influence operations. Prosecutors described it as chillingly efficient, an algorithmic record of manipulation. With each slide of technical diagrams and forensic screenshots, the gallery grew quieter. The defense attempted to interject, arguing that the data was misinterpreted. But every time, Chen countered with digital signatures, timestamps, and cryptographic verification proving authenticity. He emphasized that the system even included a verification module designed to confirm that recordings hadn't been tampered with. A feature unnecessary for home security but essential if the material were ever to be used as evidence in coercive scenarios. As the day's testimony unfolded, the ripple effects beyond the courtroom were becoming evident. Industry insiders scrambled behind the scenes, hiring cybersecurity experts to sweep their own homes and offices for hidden surveillance. Entertainment law firms held emergency strategy calls. Publicists and managers fielded frantic calls from clients who feared their private moments might be sitting in one of those redacted folders, waiting to be exposed. Prosecutors saved the most dramatic evidence for the afternoon session. They unveiled a schematic of what Chen called the Blackmail dashboard. This interface wasn't just for monitoring, it was for managing influence. Rows of targets were displayed with columns showing leverage scores, exposure history, compliance status, and escalation plans. Even with the names blurred out, the system's cold efficiency was terrifying. It was like looking at the back end of a social control machine. As the screen lit up with this schematic, a hush fell over the room. One juror covered their mouth, visibly stunned. Even the judge paused, adjusting her glasses to take in the magnitude of what she was seeing. The prosecution team let the image linger on the screen for nearly a full minute, letting its implications sink in. Outside the courthouse, the story had already gone viral. News crews camped out on the steps, while social media platforms erupted with theories, memes, and outraged commentary. Celebrities began issuing statements, some denying any connection, others expressing concern about potential privacy violations. The entire entertainment world seemed to be on edge. Back inside, Chen's voice remained calm as he described the dashboard's real-time functions. The system could send encrypted alerts when certain individuals entered monitored spaces. It could generate automated exposure previews, packaging key moments into compilations ready for deployment. It could even recommend escalation tactics, such as releasing teaser clips or providing anonymous tips to media outlets, all while keeping the source untraceable. The prosecution concluded day 2 by reiterating that this wasn't just about Diddy's legal troubles. It was about uncovering a mechanism of control that had potentially influenced entire sectors of the entertainment industry. As the session ended, the jury was left with the image of that Blackmail dashboard burned into their minds, a chilling reminder of how power can be wielded in the shadows. Marcus Chen left the stand with the same quiet composure he had displayed throughout. But for those in the courtroom, his testimony was anything but quiet. It was a wake-up call, a glimpse into the hidden machinery of influence, where data isn't just collected but used as a weapon. By the time the third day of court proceedings began, the media frenzy had grown into a full-scale global spectacle. Headlines weren't just reporting updates, they were dissecting them. Every frame from the courtroom sketches, every word from Agent Chen's testimony, every legal motion filed by Diddy's defense team was being analyzed by legal experts, cyber forensic analysts, and culture commentators alike. But inside the courtroom, the atmosphere remained deadly serious. Everyone knew that what was being unraveled here wasn't just one man's alleged misconduct. It was an entire shadow system, operating in plain sight, hidden behind walls and protected by silence. Marcus Chen, once again on the stand, picked up where he left off, with the operational protocols embedded in what the prosecution now called the influence machine. The dashboard they revealed the day before was just the control panel. Beneath it, they had discovered a sprawling network of deployment archives, categorized not only by person, but by scenario type, industry domain, and even predicted effectiveness. Chen explained how the system had been engineered to learn from each interaction, refining its predictions, improving its persuasion techniques, and maximizing its psychological impact. Prosecutors presented a damning piece of evidence next, a forensic reconstruction of what was internally labeled a persuasion package. This particular file, recovered from a hidden partition in the server system, included a timeline of events, selected video and audio clips, and a draft of an anonymous tip letter addressed to a gossip publication. Chen explained that this was just one of dozens they'd recovered, all templated, all automated, and all seemingly ready to be customized for deployment at a moment's notice. The defense tried to object, arguing that the files were speculative drafts and not proof of actual use. but prosecutors countered by pointing out the access logs tied to those files, showing dates, times, user sessions, and even transfer attempts to external devices and cloud services. Chen emphasized that these weren't just artifacts. They were active components of an ongoing system, accessed frequently and methodically by individuals whose identities are still under investigation. But it was what came next that truly shook the courtroom. Prosecutors revealed that in the final stages of forensic analysis, Chen's team had discovered a subroutine within the server software named Echo Branch. This code, buried deep in the system's firmware, appeared to be an automated threat assessment module. It would monitor social media, news coverage, and even private communication channels tied to known industry contacts, flagging any rising threats, allegations, or investigations related to people whose data was stored in the archive. If a threat reached a certain threshold, the system would automatically recommend a counter strategy, often involving the release or deployment of leverage material. This was no longer just surveillance. This was preemptive manipulation, an autonomous system reacting in real time to changes in public perception and legal risk. Chen testified that such a module would require deep integration with various data sources and APIs. It suggested an operation with not only technical sophistication but insider-level access. The courtroom sat in stunned silence as he described how the system could anticipate risk and initiate influence responses before human actors even became involved. It was, in his words, predictive coercion. Prosecutors then played a partial screen recording from the server's monitoring software. Even though all identifying information was redacted, the functionality was chilling. Alerts blinked as keywords were detected in public forums. Auto-responses were drafted. Packets were queued for delivery. And beneath it all, a quiet hum of automation managing the reputations of those who had, knowingly or unknowingly, entered Diddy's sphere of influence. Outside the courtroom, the implications were reverberating. Public relations firms launched internal audits. Talent agencies began investigating past contract irregularities. Entertainment guilds and unions called emergency meetings. And more than a few high-profile figures began scrubbing their digital footprints, quietly distancing themselves from any known association with Diddy or his properties. But inside the courtroom, prosecutors pressed further. Chen testified that his team had also discovered a separate cluster of servers, this one linked to international access logs. The metadata indicated repeated remote logins from overseas networks, often masked through VPNs and encrypted protocols. The volume of traffic suggested the influence system wasn't confined to just one man or one city. There were indications that elements of the system may have been mirrored elsewhere, either for redundancy or collaboration. A theory began to emerge. What if this wasn't just Diddy's private operation? What if others were involved, either as contributors, clients, or silent beneficiaries? The redacted files hinted at more than one user ID, and some of the system's architecture included modular extensions labeled in code as affiliate nodes. Chen admitted that these features could indicate scalability, and possibly a wider network of leverage operations operating in parallel. The prosecution didn't speculate beyond the evidence, but the implication hung heavily in the air. If such a system could be created and maintained for over 2 decades by a single high-profile figure, what else might be out there, undiscovered and undetected? At this point, the defense shifted strategy. They argued that the system, even if real, had no proven link to Diddy's direct actions. They suggested that perhaps a rogue employee or overzealous contractor had built the infrastructure without Diddy's knowledge. Chen countered with access logs tied to known devices registered to Diddy's personal and business accounts. Many of the highest-level administrative commands had been executed from IP addresses matching properties owned by Diddy, often using custom devices with biometric authentication. The courtroom held its breath as prosecutors revealed that one such device, a smartphone with a proprietary app, had been seized during the raid. On it was a secure dashboard login, encrypted messaging threads, and a log of recently accessed files from the main server. Forensic experts confirmed the phone had been used as recently as the day before the raid, to review a folder labeled Red Light Priority. By now, the cumulative weight of the evidence had created a narrative that was impossible to ignore. This wasn't a misunderstanding. This wasn't an exaggerated conspiracy. This was, according to the prosecution, a deliberate, well-funded, long-term operation designed to gather compromising information, categorize it by value, and deploy it strategically to influence people and protect power. As Chen's testimony concluded, He addressed the jury one final time. He summarized the three pillars of the system: surveillance, categorization, and strategic deployment. He explained that each of these elements alone might be questionable, but combined, they created what he called a digital coercion engine. Jurors sat stone-faced, some scribbling furiously, others simply stunned. Across the aisle, the defense looked deflated. Diddy, still absent due to his ongoing medical evaluation, had not returned to court. But in his place sat the weight of the evidence, unmoving and undeniable. When court adjourned that evening, reporters swarmed outside the courthouse. Questions flew. Who else might have been targeted? Would charges expand beyond Diddy? How long had this gone on without detection? And most chilling of all, how many decisions, endorsements, contracts, or cover-ups over the last 20 years were influenced by fear of exposure from this silent archive? Inside legal circles, conversations shifted. No longer just about one celebrity's downfall, but about how digital privacy, surveillance capabilities, and unchecked power had collided in a way no one was prepared to confront. In the days that followed, federal investigators expanded their inquiry. Subpoenas were issued to contractors, consultants, and private security firms linked to Diddy's properties. Whistleblower hotlines lit up. And deep inside government agencies, discussions began about legislative oversight of private surveillance capabilities. But for now, the courtroom testimony stood as the most comprehensive glimpse yet into the dark architecture of influence. Marcus Chen, the unassuming cybercrime expert, had opened a portal into a world where secrets weren't stumbled upon. They were hunted, curated, and turned into weapons. As the cameras panned across the federal courthouse that night, viewers everywhere sat in silence, aware that what they had just witnessed wasn't fiction, wasn't drama, and wasn't exaggeration. It was the raw, forensic, unfiltered truth about what happens when information becomes the currency of control. And somewhere in a hospital room, the man at the center of it all sat surrounded by doctors, attorneys, and silence. Because no matter what the legal verdict might be, the world had already passed judgment on the machine he allegedly built, and the lives it may have shaped from the shadows.